I'm 85 years old, and the day I signed those divorce papers, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pen. Not because I was afraid of losing him, because I was afraid of realizing how much of my life I had already lost. 65 years of marriage, 65 years of silence, 65 years of pretending bruises heal faster when no one asks questions. People looked at us and saw an old American couple who had made it work, but they never saw what happened after the front door closed. They never heard the names he called me. They never saw the woman I slowly disappeared into. And when I finally left him at 85, my own children said something that broke me even more than he ever did. They said, "Mom, why now?" Why now? Because pain does not expire with age. Because loneliness inside marriage is still loneliness. Because sometimes freedom comes late, but it still comes. And because one night, after 65 years, something happened that changed everything. My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I was born in Ohio in 1941. I grew up during a time when women were taught to endure, not escape. I met my husband Richard when I was 19 years old. He was handsome, confident, and knew exactly what to say. He brought flowers to my mother. He opened doors for me. He called me his angel. I thought I had found safety. We married 6 months later. By the time I was 21, I had my first child. By 26, I had 3 children and a house in the suburbs. From the outside, it looked like the American dream. Inside that house, it was something else. The first time Richard slapped me, he cried afterward. He said he was stressed from work. He said it would never happen again. He bought me roses the next day. I believed him. That became the rhythm of our marriage. Pain, apology, flowers, silence, then repeat. As years passed, the slaps became shoves. The shoves became punches into walls beside my head. Then came the insults. "You're stupid. You're lucky I keep you. No one else would want you." He never needed chains. His words were enough. I stayed because of the children. Then I stayed because of money. Then I stayed because I was ashamed. And after enough years pass, staying becomes a habit harder to break than love. When our children grew up, I thought things might soften. Instead, they got worse. Once the house was quiet and the children moved away, Richard had no audience left to impress. He retired at 67. That's when the drinking began every afternoon. Whiskey at noon, rage by dinner. He criticized how I cooked, how I walked, how I breathed. If dinner was late, he threw plates. If I spoke back, he shoved me against counters. If I cried, he laughed. One Christmas, my oldest daughter, Susan, noticed the bruise on my wrist. She asked what happened. I lied so quickly it frightened me. "Oh, I slipped in the garage." She looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. I think she knew. But families often protect their comfort more than the truth. Years rolled by. At 70, I thought, it's too late now. At 75, I thought, who starts over at this age? At 80, I thought, maybe I'll just die first. That was the saddest thought of all. Not wanting life, only wanting escape. Then came my 85th birthday. The children came over with cake. Grandchildren filled the living room. Everyone smiled for pictures. Richard wrapped one arm around me and kissed my cheek like he adored me. Everyone said how lucky we were. 65 years together. What a beautiful love story. I smiled so hard my jaw hurt. That night, after everyone left, I stood in the kitchen washing dishes. Richard came in drunk. He looked at the gifts on the table and said, "All this fuss for an old woman who never gave anyone anything." I said nothing. Then he picked up the birthday card from my granddaughter Lily. Inside she had written, "Grandma, you are the strongest woman I know." He laughed and tore it in half. Something inside me tore with it. I bent down to pick up the pieces, and he kicked them across the floor. Then he said the words that finally woke me up. "You'll die in this house before you ever leave me." I don't know why that sentence changed everything. Maybe because for the first time, I realized he was wrong. I looked at the broken card pieces scattered near my slippers. I thought about little Lily believing I was strong. I thought about the girl I used to be at 19. And I heard a voice inside me I had ignored for decades. It whispered, "Not here, not like this." That night, while he snored upstairs, I did something I had never done before. I opened the laptop my grandson had given me. My hands trembled as I typed 3 words into Google: "divorce lawyer nearby." And what happened the next morning changed my family forever. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. For 65 years, I had begun my days by asking one question: what mood is Richard in today? But that morning, I asked a different one. What if this is the first day of my real life? My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it in my ears. Richard was still asleep upstairs. I moved quietly like I had done my whole marriage, but this time not out of fear, out of purpose. I called the number I had written down the night before. A woman answered. Calm voice, warm voice. Law offices of Denise Harper. I nearly hung up. Instead, I whispered, "I'm 85 years old, and I think I need a divorce." There was a pause. Then she said words no one had ever said to me before. "It's not too late." I began to cry so hard I couldn't speak. She gave me an appointment for that afternoon. I told Richard I was going to the pharmacy. He barely looked up from the television. At the lawyer's office, I sat in a soft gray chair and held my purse like a shield. Denise was younger than my children. Sharp eyes, kind face. She listened without interrupting as 65 years spilled out of me. The slaps, the insults, the drinking, the fear, the pretending. When I finished, I felt embarrassed, old, weak, foolish. But Denise simply said, "Mrs. Whitmore, surviving is not weakness." Then she explained something I never imagined hearing at my age. I had rights to the house, to the savings, to peace. I signed the first papers with shaking hands, not because I was breaking my family, because I was finally breaking the cage. When I told my children, the room went silent. Susan cried first, not tears for me, tears for disruption. "Mom, why now?" she asked. "You made it this far." My son David rubbed his forehead. "Dad is 88. This could kill him." I stared at them both. For decades, I had protected their childhood, protected their holidays, protected their image of family. And now they were asking me to protect the man who destroyed mine. I said quietly, then perhaps he should have thought of that before he spent 65 years killing me slowly. No one spoke. My youngest daughter Marie looked down and whispered, "I always knew." That sentence hit me harder than anything Richard ever did. She knew, and she was just a child when she learned what marriage looked like. I reached for her hand. "I'm sorry," I said. She squeezed mine and cried, "No, Mom. I'm sorry I didn't help you leave sooner." Richard was furious when he was served. He called me names I won't repeat. He smashed a lamp. He told neighbors I was senile. He told family I was being manipulated. Then, when none of that worked, he tried tears. He sat in the kitchen and said, "After everything I gave you, this is how you repay me?" For the first time in my life, I didn't defend myself. I simply said, "You gave me fear. I'm returning it." And I walked away. The divorce took months. There were papers, meetings, ugly phone calls, and family members choosing sides. Some stopped speaking to me entirely. I grieved them, but I grieved myself more. The woman who lost decades believing endurance was love. When it was final, Denise slid the documents across the table. "Congratulations," she said softly. Congratulations. No one had ever used that word for leaving pain. I laughed through tears. At 85 years old, I walked out of that courthouse divorced, exhausted, and strangely light. I rented a small one-bedroom apartment near a park. Nothing fancy, second floor, tiny kitchen, windows that caught the morning sun. It was the first home I had ever lived in where silence felt safe. I bought yellow curtains because Richard hated bright colors. I ate toast for dinner because no one could complain. I left dishes in the sink overnight because I could. I slept diagonally across the bed. Freedom lives in small things first. 3 months later, my granddaughter Lily visited. She looked around my apartment and smiled. "It feels happy here," she said. Then she handed me a birthday card. Inside she wrote, "Grandma, now you really are the strongest woman I know." This time, no one tore it apart. I framed it. People ask if I regret divorcing so late. No, I regret waiting. I regret believing age meant my life was over. I regret teaching my daughters that suffering quietly was noble. But leaving? Never. Because whether you are 35, 55, or 85, a prison does not become a home just because you stayed there a long time. And love is not measured by how much pain you can survive. It is measured by how safe you feel being yourself. I'm 85 years old. I water my plants every morning. I drink coffee by the window. I laugh louder now. And sometimes, when sunlight fills my little apartment, I whisper to the girl I used to be, "We made it out."